Hi, everybody. It's showtime. This is S.J. Thomason, Christian-apologist.com, Psalm 23 Apologetics, whatever you want to call it. It is a free-for-all, and we're going to talk about Jesus and Jesus reigning and what people think about that around the world. And I say around the world because I suspect my friend Nathan Orman is going to be joining us. And so I just realized I had a double speaker going here. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the description here. I've got the clipboard. I'm going to copy it right over so you guys can get on. Hold on. Let's see. So here we go. So if you want to join me, the link is right there. And so again, what I have been working on today, I'll just tell you a little bit about it. And I worked on yesterday is I was looking at some debates between atheists and Christians. And I always find it kind of funny because a lot of atheists have this strategy that I see that Nathan's in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and add him. Let me just get here. I think I see V in the background. Hey, Nathan.
Hey, SJ.
Let me switch that up a little bit. So, hi, V.
You were
happy over there? Is it a beer?
You're going to be our entertainment while we eat tea, so I may have to drop out and come back in a second. But
it's tea. Very nice. That's what I have. I have.
Tea is in the last meal of the day. We're waiting for the sausages to cook. So.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. So what's the typical fare over in England that you like to eat? What kind of food?
Vegetables. I like vegetables.
Yeah, I do too.
Nathan likes potatoes and rice and English things with gravy.
So he's a pretty cheap date.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, potatoes and rice, that sounds like what I ate in college to try to make ends meet.
Yeah, I don't know. V's from Southern Europe though, so she like everything has to be like all colors and stuff.
Yeah, I like flavor in my food.
Different colors of vegetables, whereas I just want boiled potatoes, mashed potatoes, chips, gravy.
When you say chips, are you talking about French fries or potato chips?
I think what you'd call French fries, yeah, like we call chips, like oven chips. I don't know if you must do oven chips, right, in America?
Oven chips? Yeah, we don't do that, but I can
big chunky French fries.
Okay, yeah, those are good. We have curly fries and the big all the quick ones, steak fries.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's good stuff. Probably I'm getting hungry thinking about all the food you're eating, but I just my husband went to the store and came home with some tortilla soup, so I had some of that for lunch, which V would be appreciative of because it was full of vegetables. Had all kinds of good vegetables.
She gets really annoyed though at when people try and do Spanish food like in supermarkets and stuff, and it isn't like the real Spanish food. She's a bit of a bigot like that. But.
No, I had a friend who in college, she was Italian, and she's so funny. She wasn't from Italy, but she was Italian. Her heritage was Italian. So she would always talk about her Italian heritage. And she always would say stuff like, I would mispronounce mozzarella because I say mozzarella. And she's like, no, it's mozzarella. I'm like, what? No, it's mozzarella, man. You're in America. We got Danny here. Let's see. Hi, Danny.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Now, I don't think we've met before unless I've seen you in a different name or a different way.
I lurk around Discord, and so the YouTube community is rather new to me. But I did have a video with Sal. I think it's his third to last video about Pascal's wager.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that it was actually. Let me look. I think it was because just to preface, I'm an atheist. But it was highly, highly critical of Dillahunty in that debate. I don't know if you saw that debate.
I did.
While I think that Sal, we would have benefited Sal to have read Pascal's original wager. He had a good template for what was going on, whereas Dillahunty did not at all. Because the whole point of Pascal's wager, right, is to show that there might be some prudential or practical reason to believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me.
Oh, no worries.
There's prudential or practical reason to believe in God. That's what Pascal, the essence of Pascal. Now, but Dillahunty was asking for epistemic reasons, right? What would certify knowledge of God, or what would be justification for God? in that sense, but that's not what Pascal really cared about. And then do you remember the claim about self-deception too?
Yeah, he said
That was
yeah.
insane to me, right? Because the point, if you understand Pascal was a kind of agnostic, actually, not with respect to belief in God, but with respect to knowledge of God. He didn't think you could know God like you could, like by some kind of like philosophical proof. Nor did he think you could disconfirm God that way.
Mhm.
So he didn't think that like these epistemic reasons really played a big role. So he was looking for other kinds of reasons, like prudential reasons to believe in God, or to like, he was given a very different kind of apologetic, right? So when Dillahunty was saying you're just deceiving yourself, right? When you're attempting to go through the motions of, let's say, Christian practice or religious practice, that can only be true if you already started with the rejection of God, or if you already believe that God didn't exist, right? So if I don't believe that there are any, like I gave the example to Sal, something like if I wanted to know some calculus, right? I could open I don't know how to snap my fingers and believe it right now, right? I would have to go through a process, right? I would open a calculus book, talk to some professors, whatever. There's a whole process. And when I come to all these new mathematical truths, I didn't deceive myself, right? And that's because I didn't start with the belief that there are no mathematical truths with respect to calculus, right? So it was just an egregious misunderstanding of Pascal just to demand these like other justifications from Sal, right? And not engage with like, okay, are there practical reasons to believe in God, right? And anyways, we discussed that for about an hour in that video. But
So you were a warm up then to Matt Dillahunty.
Am I what?
Were you a warm up to, or did you do that after the Dillahunty debate?
After.
Oh, okay.
I wish I had done it before. I wish I talked, because then because Sal didn't know some of the terms to use, because he was like, when he said the words perfect knowledge, I think I knew what he meant, right? Like that when we're faced with like a case where like there seems to be a probability, but we can't bring ourselves to that belief because we feel like we don't know all the facts that might shift the probabilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we might still be faced with, okay, well, what should I believe what might be functional or useful to my life, right? I see this particular religious belief as being something that would motivate me to do good things I want to do. There's social relations that I could create. There's all these other practical reasons, right? But anyway, the point is that Dillahunty didn't even try to engage with these sort of arguments. In fact, mischaracterized Pascal in the very first opening. What did he say? He said it's the worst argument for God, right?
Yeah.
Like, but what does he mean by argument there, right? I think I hope that many people. Like I said, I'm an atheist, but I think like my parents are not, right? And I feel like they would be very depressed people if they weren't Christians, right? And the last thing I would want is to dislodge those beliefs that give them a lot of meaning, right?
Well, let me ask you this: if you're an atheist, were you raised as a Christian, and maybe was it a young Earth creation sort of a?
I started that way, but then I started not to care about those kind of concerns. I was more interested in the natural theology stuff.
Okay, so you started off. Your parents are young Earth creationists?
Yeah, well, I think so. I think that. Yeah, but I think my dad changed his view to old Earth.
Okay.
But the point is that it was never an issue whether there was old Earth or young Earth, because the point is that like I think that if you want to understand the mind of a young Earth creationist, you've heard of the wine analogy, right? The wine analogy where wine takes time to ferment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the best wine takes years and if not decades, right? Ferment. Well, and so, but in the miracle where Jesus created water into wine, that was an instantaneous process, presumably.
Right.
So they're going to say something like, well, maybe some of them, not all of them, right, are going to think that, well, why couldn't God just create the earth or the solar system universe in a way where if it would seem like if it were to come about organically or naturally, that it would take a long time, right? Because
Well,
you know,
that's the young Earth justification. It's the idea of the appearance of
Right,
age.
yeah.
And if you saw a tree and you would say, okay, if the tree that appeared at the beginning of time or whatever of the Earth, whenever the trees appear, the first one would appear with the rings in it already, as if it's already aged that much. And so that's their argument. And I actually, I mean, to be honest, I'm an old Earth creationist. I believe in an old Earth. I don't think the Bible even makes us look at a young Earth. I don't think there were 6 24-hour days. However, if God wanted that to happen, if he wanted to make the Earth appear as one way, then it really, or something like that. That's perfectly doable from my perspective, that God can do anything. Nothing's impossible with God.
I don't see, like, if a young Earth creationist told me that, right, that, look, I have more confidence in this kind of interpretation of Genesis, and I understand all the other interpretations or the scientific evidence for old Earth, but I just place more confidence in that alternative interpretation of young Earth. I don't think they're being irrational, actually.
No, I don't think so. I think because it's our faith in God, and it's really about, what I actually get bothered about, to be honest, is I don't like the fact that there are some young Earth creationists who it seems like they're making the argument about the old Earth versus the young Earth to be the primary focus in the Bible, and it takes away the focus on Jesus' resurrection, which is which Christians should be focusing on, not focusing on 6 days or 7 days and 24-hour days. I just don't think that's a good use of time.
I think I do agree with you. However, let's play around with this argument that Ken Ham brings about. And I don't think it works, but I want to know your response, right? It's something like this, right? That we have our observations and we have kind of the empirical data of how the Earth is now, right? And how the universe is now, right? And we had prior to these observations, we might come to a natural reading of Genesis, right? And so now there's a question here, right? Do I stick with my natural reading, right? And kind of lose confidence in the empirical data? Or do I fit the empirical data in a different interpretation? Now that is a serious question, right?
Well, that's concordance. And so I would actually say that if you go back to how the early church fathers looked at it, a lot of the early church fathers never dated it to 6,000 years or never did anything quite like that. So I think that I actually think that there are multiple ways to look at the interpretations there, even if you didn't know about what the science says with respect to the age of the Earth.
It's true. Okay, so I see what you're saying, but I think what I'm making, just for argument's sake, it doesn't matter what's true so much as what is motivating the decision. Okay, look, I could grant any position to be true in this hypothetical, but the hypothetical is this, right? That there is some presumably plain reading of the text, okay, and then there's some kind of observation or encounter in the present world, right? And the question is, right, which one ought you compromise if it's the case that it's perfectly coherent to go one way or another?
Right. Well, I just think the honest approach, the most honest approach, is to look at the information that's there and try to make sense of it, and to realize that your interpretation of whatever is in Genesis might not actually be a correct interpretation. And I think that's the most humble position that you should take. Now, I want to say back to Nathan is back on here. So I don't know if you guys know each other. You want to introduce yourselves, guys? So the audience, in case the audience doesn't know you either.
Yeah. I don't know Danny. I don't think we've spoken.
Don't worry, I'm not a really big deal in these parts. So,
well, I've not really spent that much time on Discord and stuff as well. I like a lot of those. Tons of those like ask yourselves debates.
Yeah, I know. I debated Ask Yourself when I was a Christian on Christianity, and that was 3 years ago. I have that video actually, but he knows me. We know each other. We've talked a few times.
But you found me through Sal. Is that how you found me?
Actually, I probably first came across your name because I'm a friend of Tom's, right?
Tom Rabbit.
Yes.
Okay. I just saw the video. Did you guys see the video Tom Rabbit just made? Nathan, I know you saw it.
Well,
and Darth hates me. He doesn't talk to me because Well, I'll tell you. I recorded him while he was having a conversation with me, and then I told him I recorded him, and he hasn't spoken to me since, right? Because he kicked me out. He banned me from. He asked me, and this was when I was a Christian too, right? He asked me. He tried to, because I was an evidentialist Christian. I rejected Precept, right? And he was trying to get me on board with Precept. And I basically said, I'm not interested in engaging with you, Darth, because you're just going to get heated, right?
Wrong answer, Danny. Wrong.
But I recorded that encounter, right? And I told him, by the way, I recorded that encounter because I felt guilty about it as a Christian, right? And and that was the last time I spoke to him.
Okay. So I want to say hi to Craig. Craig, it just started. So we just started about 16 minutes ago. So in the chat, I want to say hi to the people in the chat. By the way, I've got Ivan Van Veen. It looks like he might have left, or Van Veen. Impressive, Spartan theology. So thank you guys, and thank you everybody who's on here. So we could take this conversation into a lot of directions. I think that since we're on here, I know that I've got. So you say, Danny, you're an atheist, and then we've got Nathan, who is an agnostic, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm a Christian. I've never been an agnostic or an atheist. So I honestly don't fully understand those positions.
Like you don't understand our reasons, or you don't understand the position itself?
No, both. I don't. No,
yeah.
I understand what the position is. I mean, are you guys both a lack the belief type, or are you the type that has a positive view where you'll say, I just don't believe in God?
Well,
I think
that isn't it? Sorry, you go, Danny. Though.
No, Nathan, you go. I insist. I'm a guest here, so I shouldn't be.
I'm a guest as well. So
okay.
From my point of view, SJ, there's different types of agnosticism, right? So some agnostics are making the claim that, say, in principle, we cannot know whether a god or gods exist, for example. Some people might be saying we can't know with respect to like a particular model of God. My type of agnosticism is like a local agnosticism. I'm just saying that what I'm doing is I'm withholding my judgment because I could see how I could rationally hold either of those positions. I don't think it's conclusive either way. So I just kind of withhold my judgment on it and don't fall down on either side of it.
Okay. How about you, Danny?
Yeah, I think there are reasons. Now, I think that I'm an agnostic with respect to a God that can fail or that's not omnipotent or omniscient, right? But I'm an atheist with respect to the classical kind of notion of God that's defended in like philosophy of religion and the analytic tradition, or like what certain apologists might argue for. So
let me just get an idea of how long have you been an atheist, Danny? You said 3 years ago you were a Christian, right?
It's been about a year.
A year? Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that turned you from Christianity to atheism?
It's hard to say. It did happen somewhat organically, but I remember the moment where someone mentioned God, and I realized I didn't know what was being said anymore. It was a very weird. Basically, they said that God wanted XYZ. I forgot what they were claiming. It was a pastor, and I couldn't really. Now I know I don't mean this as a snipe, right? But I just tell you how I felt, right? This has nothing to do with I'm not arguing for anything here, right? But it really felt like when they said God wants yada yada yada, it felt like they were saying like a square triangle wants yada yada yada, And at that moment, I realized that I could not believe, or at least I didn't know how to believe in that kind of thing, right?
But what did they say God wants?
I was a pastor. And I mean, pastors frequently say God wants X, God wants Y, right? It's just the general notion of God wanting things.
What was God wanting something that you didn't like? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, how would a statement like that lead you away from God? I don't get that.
No, it's the idea. I don't remember what was the object of desire. I don't think it had to do with like any sort of prescriptions that God wants of me, right, or anything like that. But it just had to do with like the notion of God wanting didn't make any more sense to me.
Okay. All right, that's fair enough. I think that when you look at the evidence, and actually I just made another video at Matt Dillahunty's expense, and so,
I really don't like that guy, by the way. So I called into his show and I pretended to be a theist, and try to troll him that way because he deserves it. But yeah, he got really frustrated and started cursing at me, which means
Really?
that's the right thing. But
So wait, wait, let me go back. I want to make sure I heard you correctly because I was reading what Craig was writing while I was listening to you. Did you call into the atheist experience and pretend to be a Christian?
yeah.
That sounds hilarious.
Yeah,
I played it on here, except for I noticed last time I played atheist experience stuff, they actually slapped me with a copyright thing.
Yeah,
So-
it was. I actually made. Okay, so I know what triggers Matt pretty well. Like the way he scrolls through topics and gets callers, anything that has to do with like proving the supernatural, he gets really triggered. So I knew I would get on the show really well because I said, I think the claim that I made is that God sufficiently explains the supernatural. And I know I knew I was going to be one of the callers, right? Just with that really clickbaity title. And he did, right? After like a call later, he said, "Oh, Danny from LA or whatever." Right. And then I made actually I couldn't really get to it because he kept on talking over me and muting me. But I made an argument for why the mind is non-material, right? I don't think the mind is material. And I don't really think that God explains why it's non-material, but I knew that he could not get past that, right? That if I because it doesn't really, in my opinion, right? It doesn't follow that if your mind is immaterial, that therefore God exists, not directly at least. You're going to have to, that's a lot more work to do. But I knew that we wouldn't be able to get over the claim that the mind is immaterial, right? So we discussed that. He got really angry. I said he was making a category error because he was asking me, demonstrate to me that you can have a mind without a brain. I don't know what he wanted of me, like a box of minds. Like it was just like kind of crazy how he reacted.
That's a really big coincidence because today when I made my little video that's going to air at 5:00 Eastern, it's only a 17-minute video, but I found some very funny comments from debates that I was amused by, but I also brought in Inspiring Philosophy's argument with the mind. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the ones that I put in there. So it's the issue of the consciousness.
Any argument but Inspiring Philosophies.
Any argument? So wait, he got kind of complex, Inspiring Philosophy. And to be honest, I'm not a scientist, as you guys know, and so I'm not an expert on minds or anything like that.
Well,
obviously,
it's funny. It's a philosophical issue. That's what I accused Dillahunty of, right? That they think that the issue of mind is a scientific, empirical question, but it's actually a philosophical issue. Like for instance, we can have a concept of mind without having any knowledge of our brains, right? Like people, Aristotle thought the brain wasn't even the thinking kind of thing, right? He thought the heart was the thing that thought, right?
Yeah, I think I just heard that somewhere.
Yeah, and the thing is, so the thing is that you can know everything about yourself without knowing a single fact about your brain. Isn't that cool? So that means that if that is a concept, right, that the personhood or the mind can be understood independently from any kind of physical state, then conceptually they're different, and thus under the analysis of a philosopher, not a scientist.
This is a funny, I just want to have this comment right here. So Impressive says, I think you are all coming at this the wrong perspective. Matthew knows exactly what he is doing. And he even calls him Matthew instead of Matt. So don't forget, he likes magic and likes to deceive people. So he thinks he's getting one over on you. I have to say what Sal said that was funny is that in Matthew, what Matt said is he was talking about, apparently he loves gambling and he loves craps. And so it's coincidence he was in there. He's taking you guys would say in a Pascal's wager, the traditional view of that is that you take a gamble. You can gamble that God exists. And if God does exist, you're good to go. And if you gamble that God doesn't exist, you're not good to go. So the idea is, why not gamble that God exists? Because in one respect, it's not going to hurt you at all to gamble for God, but it could hurt you to gamble against God. That's my understanding of Pascal's wager.
That's essentially it to me too. Yeah. But yeah, no, I can't stand Dillahunty. I look up to other atheists like Graham Oppie, Alex Malpass.
Did you guys see the Malpass, his recent one? He just debated Randall Rouser. Did you catch that?
Right, I saw the first 30 minutes. But no, I really respect Malpass big time. But these people like Dillahunty and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens, they're just all philosophically bankrupt to me.
Well, see what I see coming from them, and I think that, and I agree with you. I've actually had, No, I didn't have Grant. Did I have Grant Oppie on my channel? I had I didn't have him. I had
Australian, right?
What's that? Maybe
You
I
had
did.
an Australian accent?
Yeah, I got to remember who I had. I had somebody who's famous. I just don't remember if it's him or I had him. He was on there debating this guy who calls him Supreme Apologist.
Oh, I like
What's that?
Stephen Law too.
You
Yeah.
had Stephen Law on, right? Wasn't that who you had?
Say it again.
Stephen Law.
Oh yeah, that's who I had. Okay, it
Yeah,
wasn't
I
Grant
like
Oppie.
Stephen Law too.
That's right. I was trying to get Joshua, this one guy, was trying to organize a debate with Graham Oppie, now that I think about it. And the timing wasn't going to work because Australia's kind of, unless you're like Sentinel Apologetics, most people in Australia sleep at normal times when we're up. So Sentinel Apologetics will be up like at 2 o'clock in the morning, just hanging out. So. No, I think I actually agree with you. The one thing about Sam Harris that kind of gets under my skin a little bit is he'll erect a straw man about Christianity and he'll kind of equate us to the Islam faith and then he'll break down the straw man. And I'm like, well, you didn't really represent what we believe. And then what Matt does is he's good at rhetoric. So Matt's really good at saying things like, why would God kill God for our sake or something like that. So it sounds something that's kind of snappy and you can remember it, or I'm more moral than your God. Those kind of statements sound like something people can remember and they take it with them and that sort of thing.
That's true. Yeah, that's probably a part explanation for his popularity.
Shoot the link to Craig's DM. Okay, let me DM Craig. You guys just keep chatting here for a second while I get this thing going to Craig.
We're supposed to chat, Nathan.
Yeah, go ahead and chat. I'm going to get this. I'm shooting him a link.
That's a bad request for me, SJ. You don't know about my social problems. Danny, is that tree like something?
It's from Lord of the Rings. I'm a big Tolkien fan.
Yeah, I remember it actually. I think on was it Gondor, the shield?
Yes, the white tree of Gondor. That's right.
Oh, that's great. See, I don't even know if I read part of that book so many years ago. I barely remember it. So,
Yeah,
hey, Converse Contenders here.
Hey, what's up, guys? How are y'all?
Doing pretty well. So yeah, I'll add Danny to my list of people in my video, that one video that I run where it shows all the people who've been on my show.
I've been added to a list, SJ. That sounds concerning.
I'm going to add you to a list. Yeah, I got a really cool little video that shows people who's been on my show, and so Conver's been in here a few times, and Nathan probably out of you guys has been on here the most. Nathan likes to go free for all. What's that?
I think I've been on like all of your. No, maybe one or two. I've not actually. Almost all of them though.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm glad you come on.
So you're hardly a guest then, Nathan.
I'm what? Sorry, I didn't.
You're hardly a guest then, it seems.
No, he's a co-host actually.
Well, it depends. If you ask, Darth Dawkins is the guest of honor, of course.
Right.
SJ invites on, and then I rudely interrupt him.
SJ, do you think Christians should look up to Darth?
I don't think, and I'll be honest, I don't think Darth is a very good role model for Christians because of a number of reasons. One is because he came right after me. I mean, it wasn't just even in that video where you guys witnessed that. I've had several interactions with him, and the very first one went bad. And the one, even when the guy called The Rage, Nakasuchi, when he watched that little video that Tom Rabbit made, Darth was in the chat and he was totally ragging on me the whole time in the chat. And I thought, this guy's just too much. That's not what you're supposed to do.
One of my most viewed videos is Jim Majors and debated Darth Dawkins, and we had the after show on my channel, and it was super long. It was hours long, but that's one of my most viewed videos actually.
Wow.
But SJ, I was going to talk to you guys about the. I know Sal argued the other night with Matt Dillahunty on Pascal's wager. I got to tell you, like, Pascal's wager, as how it's applied by most people, is actually my least favorite argument. And at JMD Apologetics, I remember he asked me that on his show. He's like, "What's your favorite and least favorite argument or whatever?" And I said Pascal's wager, and I'm gonna tell you why. This is my reasoning, right? Like, I think Pascal, the way he formulated it, he actually did an okay job. Like, I think the point is just kind of like, hey, the stakes are high, right, or something like that. But in the modern version, like most people use, is like, hey, if you're gonna, lose, you might as well lose on the side of God or whatever. Like, I just feel like, well, you want to just believe so that you don't get in trouble or something like that, right? Like that's kind of my thing is like, wouldn't you want to believe it more because it was the truth, or you get where I'm coming from with that? What do you
Yeah,
guys
that
think?
makes sense.
Well, when you believe something, you hold it to be true. So, but I think that what's really important to take away from Pascal is that he's talking to the agnostic. He's not talking to an atheist, right? He's
Sure.
talking to the person that there's weighing the options, and there's like the epistemic reasons, the justifications don't really push one way over another. So then there's a question about whether, okay, if I really can't know in the way that, like, if I can't know in this kind of way, should I accept belief on account of something else? And sometimes we believe things, or we just on account of its prudence, or on account of its prudential value, right? I don't think there's anything irrational about that, right? Like, so let's say I don't know whether God exists or not, and then although you're right, Pascal points to the infinite potential value and as a big thing that weighs on one over another. But even if I think the argument still functions in a more streamlined way, to more applicable for someone that doesn't think that should factor into belief. You could still talk about whether it's like good for your life, right? So look, if I don't know what to believe, but if I were to believe, I could belong to a community of believers, right? That it would motivate me to like do well in school, or that, or that I could feel some kind of a meaningful connection with blah, 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 right? So there's like those reasons I think are actually, I mean, by definition, important reasons, right? And in that sense, it's a different kind of argument altogether. It's not an argument in the sense that like we're talking about justification, but it's an argument to accept something on account of a practical reason, or something that fits in with our goals outside of like what's true, but more in line with how do I live my life?
Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
And let me just say, I just see Craig Reed has joined really quickly, so I want to make sure he gets to say hello.
Craig.
Hi, can you hear me? Is this working properly?
We
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay, cool. The phone isn't working, so we'll see. We'll see how long before I start cutting out.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here.
That actually just happened to me. Like half of what Danny just said, I missed because my phone was like, fluttering. But I'm not going to be here very long anyway. But yeah, sorry.
I keep having to hit my mute button because I swear I have to wonder if the leaf blower guy somehow has access to my YouTube account and figures out when I'm going to run the free-for-alls, because every time I run a free-for-all, the leaf blower guy's out there blowing around, the neighbor with the leaf blower.
Oh, I bet Nathan set it up probably.
It's like, knows who my leaf blower guy. It's not even my leaf blower, it's the one across the street, and they always come and blow the leaves right when they. Anyway, okay, sorry about that. So,
Awesome.
So Pascal's wager, I think the vote is, I've got one agnostic, an atheist, and 3 Christians here in the room. So the most people would say you do not like Pascal's wager, even if you're a Christian, you don't really like it.
Well, let me phrase it like the way I put it was, I think that Pascal had a point in his original formulation, but I said the way that is typically used today, which in its modern use, like what I hear from, like you can almost get this from any new believer is, well, wouldn't you want to err on the side of, God, or wouldn't you, if you had this like choice, wouldn't you rather, what do you got to lose if you die? And like, that's not really how to convert somebody though, if that's the point of, and some people use it that way. It's like you want them to believe just because if they die and are wrong, they get nothing. It's like I don't. But Pascal's original like method, I think he was like Danny said, he was answering a different question.
I like you guys have making some good points. One thing I have to agree with, I was never raised with this idea that if you don't believe, you're going to hell. Like that, talking about hell, that never even entered the conversation. And Catholics don't even talk like that, let alone actually read the Bible or do anything like that. I'm not trying to disparage Catholics, but as a former Catholic, that's just not something that we did. But the other thing is, I have heard like people like Ray Comfort and other people like that, they go out there and they try to say, you know, you're a sinner, you have to repent. If you don't repent, you're going to burn in hell. And I just, that's just not the approach. You don't want to scare people into believing. And I think to an extent, Pascal's wager, the way some people interpret it, is kind of scaring people into believing. So, or into saying they believe, put it that way.
I would think that, and this is just speculation, but I would think that most people come to Christianity not on account of epistemic reasons, right? So you might tell them the story of Jesus, right? Like that he died for your sins and all this stuff. And it's and the story really pops out to them as very significant and, you know, awesome. And that, you know, God would do such a kind of thing, right? And so they come to belief. And to me, that is not an epistemic reason. To me, that's some kind of there's other grounds to accept that the religion. That I think that's what's going on there.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. I want to say hi to everybody in the chat really quickly. I see Irshman and Halcyonic Kaiju, Irish with some sun, Stephanie Tretton, Plastic Jesus. Plastic Jesus says Catholic Light is a heavy Christian. I always thought Catholic Light is Lutheran. It's like, I don't know. So, okay. So hi, everybody. So what do you guys think, if coming from either perspective, what are your arguments that you think are the strongest arguments for Christianity? Like if there's something that could possibly convince you someday, this one could be it.
Probably argument from reason. That's probably I think the most powerful.
Okay. I got to say hi to Bulldog here. Bulldog, I don't think you've been on here before.
No, but I've seen you before on Google Hangouts.
Very cool.
Yeah, I've seen you heaps of times.
Where are you from, Bulldog? You sound like you're from down under.
Yeah, how did you know?
It sounds like an Australian accent. I could be wrong.
Your camera's upside down.
Yeah, this is the best country in the world, if you didn't know. And if you're wondering why my camera is not going too good, it's night time over here. It's actually 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wait a second. Is this you sound like Gavin Ehrlichman.
He sounds like Gavin, yeah.
Who's Gavin? I don't know who Gavin is.
Okay, not you then.
No, not me. No. But I've seen you in plenty of debates.
Okay, so what side are you on? Are you a Christian? Are you non-believer? What are you?
No, I'm a non-believer, and I just like watching you getting thrashed all the time and still have a smile on your face.
That's just well, thank you. I think.
Well, yeah, it is a sort of a compliment, but I just like watching you getting beaten down. Like it's just so great.
Oh
and I'm glad
What a compliment!
I'm glad that you dig your heels in.
That's so funny. So that you found my channel because you saw me in debates?
Yeah. But I saw you have. Oh, well, I've seen lots of Christians in debates, you know, and it's just totally amazing. Like some of them get converted, which is good, right? You know, they go, "Yeah, I've seen the light," but you're a hard person. You've dug your heels in, and you know, some people won't change their minds. It doesn't matter what evidence is produced.
Including yourself?
Sorry?
Including yourself? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, you've got to convince me it's true.
Oh, okay.
Or do we do the convincing, or do you do the convincing? I mean, that's the one thing I always think that Matt Dillahunty does, is he tries to make it that we have to convince him. And then he always says at the end of no matter what evidence you present him, I'm not convinced. And so
I know. I'll tell you why, because your evidence is rubbish.
wow, we got a couple more people who just added in here. So let me just have them also say hello. So I've got Outbound and Apocalypse here. So you guys want to introduce yourselves? I don't think either of you have been on my channel either before.
Is this your channel, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, right. What I ever since Google Hangouts went down, there's all these new because I've been sick for 2 years, so I've only come back in the last 4 or 5 days because I'm getting better, right? And I've got myelitis. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's basically if I was in America, I would have shot myself because guns are very easy to get over there.
Oh wow! So you're in pain?
I'll tell you the truth, and I don't mind telling the truth. I felt like a junkie and I used to sit in the corner of my bedroom with my knees up to my neck, and I used to pop pills just to take the pain away. They never took the pain away 100%. They probably only worked about, say, 50 to 60%. And I went through about 20 odd doctors. And out of the 20, I used to get kicked out of their office because they used to throw their hands up in the air and say, I don't know what's wrong with you, go away. And sometimes I actually walked out when they wouldn't give me any pills. And they used to say things like, oh, you're lying, you're just a junkie. And it's like, well, if that's what you think, that's fine. I said, see you later. And then I used to go home, ring up another doctor, make an appointment, get some more pills, go home, sit on the bed, stay in bed for 18 hours a day, and in pain, by the way. And then finally, after seeing all of these doctors, I found a specialist, and I was in his office for about 15 to 20 minutes, and he'd done 4 tests on my body, which no other doctor did anywhere near that. They were only playing guessing games. And he said to me, after he examined me, he says, I'm 95% sure you've got trivicular myelitis.
Oh, wow.
And
So you found out.
and believe it or not, he said to me, he said, I've never had a doctor even guess 50% or even nominate a figure. And he says, I want you just to do one thing. He says, I'm going to give you a script to go to the hospital to get a scan done. And he says, I want you to go tonight. And I says, really? Tonight? I says, that's amazing. So I went there at 8 o'clock at that night. I got the scan done.
Okay, Bulldog. Listen, I've gotten a lot of people in the chat who are saying, I mean, it's a long story, and we're very sorry to hear it. But I got a lot of people saying, hey, we got a couple of other people joined, and they haven't even had a chance to say hi. So let me just.
All right, no, so sorry to tell you about my problem anyway. I'll shut up now for a second.
No, I'm very sorry to hear that you have that problem, and I can understand that. That's. I mean, I don't know anything about it.
I'm better now. That's why I come on Google Hangouts, because, like I told you before, I couldn't even get. I'm only about 2 meters away from my bed, and I couldn't even. That's how sick I was. I couldn't even be bothered getting on internet.
Okay, well, let me turn it over here, because I've got 2 that just joined. Apocalypse here, that's John Depew, and I've been trying to get him on my channel for a while. And we won't talk about any subjects that he doesn't want to talk about. So we can, and then and Ronan Kanushi. Let me go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, well, I'm
and Outbound. There's 3 new people actually.
John Depew. Yeah, first time on this channel. Thought I'd jump on for a little bit, just see what's going on, but. Yeah, I've got a channel, Apocalypse here, where we do various interviews on theology and biblical studies and the way that they relate to sort of practical life, and then do other sort of primer videos explaining certain theological and biblical topics as well. So yeah, check it out.
Great, thank you. And so also let's get to Outbound, because Outbound was next, and then Ronan. Outbound, you still there? We'll go to Ronan.
Hello. I came by. SJ, I was subscribed to you, then I unsubscribed because, well, I don't want to antagonize Christians. And what brought me back, I saw something Brother John posted that you were on, so I thought I'd come by and visit. And the idea came up in my mind, and surprisingly, atheists do not understand where I falsely presumed that they would understand the difference between the mind, e.g. a God, and reality, the now. And it was surprising to me that atheists just didn't understand that. I mean, I understand a theist wouldn't want to accept it because they do have this concept, I call it, of the mind of a God. I don't have any issue with faith, which is an emotion. The Bible bears that out. But I have problems with religion, the practice thereof, because obviously religion wants to impose its will on other religions or non-theists. And I was wondering if you have reconciled that.
The idea that religions, I mean, that people...
The idea of the concept, e.g. a God, or it could be e.g. music, it doesn't matter. For example, a God is of the mind, where reality is of the now.
Oh, okay. Okay. God is of the see, I would say that we're contingent minds, contingent on an absolute mind, and the absolute mind is God. And I think that's just the idea that mind comes before matter, and looking at the Big Bang and those sorts of arguments. I think you can make a pretty good case for a God, not just being the fact that we have a mind, but I'll defer to anyone else who wants to add to that.
I don't even really know what has been said. The mind and the now like I mean,
Okay.
mind exists temporally, right? Like I don't really understand what
Okay, a
you're
simple
saying.
example would be saying that yesterday was a memory, tomorrow is a fantasy. All we have is the now. I can remember what I studied in school, for example, and I can imagine what might happen in the future, for example. But in the now, I cannot produce a God or a test, if you will, to prove a God. It's a concept of the mind that one believes in, supports, and practices. I can understand that. That's of the mind. But in reality, if you and I were doing a simple math test, 1 + 1 = 2, that's in reality. I can prove it to you, you can prove it to me, vice versa, in the now. But a God is like a promise of something, which isn't real. Promises sometimes never get borne out. So in the now, I can talk to you and you can claim a God. Okay, if that's your standard, fine. I understand what your standard is, but I know many theists, you do too, and atheists, I do, that don't live up to those standards. They're hypocrites. Okay, fine. You can't live up to your standard. I accept that. You're a human being. We're all flawed in the now. But
Well,
again,
can I come in on that point then, Ronan? So I think you said, and I was surprised at that 1 + 1 = 2 would be in reality. But if I said to you something like, I have a concept of a being which is that than which nothing greater can be conceived, okay? But if that than which nothing greater can be conceived only existed in my mind and not in reality, then it wouldn't be the greatest thing that can be conceived, because I can conceive a being that exists in my mind and reality. Therefore, a greatest conceivable being must exist. Now, that's like the same sort of thing as saying like 1 + 1 = 2, right? Would you agree in terms of like if I could show by logical reasoning that like √2 is an irrational number or something, like surely I could show like God exists in the same sort of way. I don't get why you're rejecting like argumentation for God's existence or something.
I think that the hard thing about God is even it says it's
again,
in the Bible itself is that we really can't, with our little faulty minds, can't really fully understand him, and we can't know everything about him. I just wanted to quickly go over real quick to both Outbound hasn't been introduced yet, and I also just see Irish with some sun, and I've seen Irish with some sun in my chat a lot, so welcome. It's nice to see both of you guys too.
Good to be here.
Yeah. So do you guys want to? I think right now I don't know Outbound. I don't know if Outbound is able to get on here, but Outbound is muted. But Irish with some sun. So where are you coming from?
Well, I'm currently living in Northern Ireland. So.
Oh, okay.
But I grew up in the south of Ireland and Germany for most of my life.
Very nice. Very nice. That's those two places. I've never been to Ireland. I'm dying to go to Ireland, but I've been to Germany.
Oh, Ireland's really nice. It's a bit expensive and it rains a lot, but other than that, it's really good. Yeah, that's what I hear about Ireland. So Nathan's on here, and he's from Manchester, right, Nathan?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I've been to Manchester. I have an aunt that lives there.
So now we've got representation from different parts of the globe. So it's pretty cool. So that just shows no matter when we run this show, we'll get people coming on from all over the world. So I think right now, if I'm not mistaken, Craig and Apocalypse here and I are the only three who are Christians in this crew. Is that true?
Well, no, I would say I'm an agnostic Christian.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Now in Northern Ireland, I know there's a big dispute a lot of times over history between the Catholics and the Protestants. Which side do you lean on, if you lean on either?
Well, I grew up evangelical Protestant, but in 2016, after about 2 years, I became Eastern Orthodox.
That's
so yeah, I've been all over the place. I've been Reformed, Calvinist, Grew up mostly Pentecostal evangelical, but now I would be Orthodox. But I would say that I'm kind of agnostic, but at the same time, I still adhere to Christianity.
That's very interesting. What's interesting about the two places that you've lived is one of them has the highest levels, or among the highest levels of humanitarian orientation or humane orientation, according to the Globe studies, and that's Ireland. People have this, which means benevolence. It's another word to say benevolence and kindness and those sorts of things. And Germany actually has, West Germany has the lowest levels of humane orientation of all the study. 62 societies studied. Germany was the lowest. And the funny thing is that if you look at the relationship in those two countries to God, it's like the Irish are known to be believers. John Lennox has always said that. And then you get the Germans, not so much.
Well, I would say that there's kind of been a shift in Ireland. So after everything has happened with the Catholic Church and, because Ireland's been trying to modernize and because of the EU, there's been a sense of Ireland, or a lot of Irish people are kind of trying to prove we're very progressive. So they've really taken on a lot of progressive beliefs, and they kind of associate the Catholic Church and the tradition with the past at the times when things were a lot worse now. So there's been a massive move away from Catholicism and a move more towards progressivism, liberalism. But in general, there'll still be a sense of faith. But I think that a lot of people are moving away from that in Ireland.
One of the reasons why I like both Ireland and Germany and also England is my heritage is from those three countries. And so that's where a lot of my background is, and in Norway too. But the thing about those countries is I've looked at the population sizes in Ireland. When my relatives came over here from Ireland, they came over during the potato famine when Ireland had about 8 million residents. And now Ireland's down to only about 5 million people. And I think people don't put that they don't think about that much when you think about Ireland. It's a very small country population wise.
Oh, it definitely is. There's a real sense of if you live somewhere, almost everyone knows everyone, even to see. But the sense of community probably has gone a little bit down now as people are moving into the cities or commuting, or they're not really staying in the country. Whenever they finish uni, they kind of move out and go to another country. But there is still a deep sense of community. But I'd say that those are kind of changing as well.
Yeah, that's just fascinating. I really want to get over there. My heritage, most of the people from my family who were Irish were from around Cork.
Oh, Cork. Oh, it's a really funny accent down in Cork.
Oh, there is? What do they sound like?
I couldn't do it justice.
It's that bad?
We just tend to imitate people from Cork. It's funny.
Oh, that's funny. That is funny. So good. So, well, welcome to the channel. I'm glad to see all of you guys on. So what does everyone want to talk about? Does anyone have a topic you'd like to hit on?
Yeah, I want to talk to you, SJ, because I know you the most out of all of these people in here. I know Ronan, right, and Outbound, but I don't know anybody else in here. But if I do talk to you and I found it a bit abusive, because that's just my nature, and I do shout a lot. And the reason why I shout a lot is because I used to work in a warehouse where I had to shout a lot to make other people hear, because the warehouse was like 3,000 square meters, and you got to shout to make the other person go on the other end and hear you that the forklift is coming and go and pick up the boxes. So I've just had 15 years of doing that. It's just sort of like I do it naturally now, and I can't help it. But anyway, I really wanted to talk to you about the Bible, because I think that's what the topic was today.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I want to know why you've obviously read the Bible, right? I don't know how many times, and I've seen you in many debates, and I want to know why you still believe. And do you ever believe that you've ever lost an argument?
Do I believe I've lost an argument? Of course I do.
Yeah.
I don't try to pretend like I've won all my arguments. I lose arguments daily with my husband.
Well, I've never met your husband, and that's another thing. I was wondering if you were still married. And is your husband an atheist or a Christian?
Oh no, he's a Christian, but he's not. He's one of the kind of Christians that most Christians are, where he just has this faith and he doesn't really feel he needs to back it up with any sort of evidence that much. So he's just a believer. He said he just wouldn't doubt Jesus. That's how my sister is too, to be honest. My sister, because I said, Jen, I've got all this information I can share with you. I've got these books I've written. She's like, why do I need any of that? I've got proof with my own experiences with God. So.
Well, I have heard you with, certain statements that you've made in certain things, and and some people have debated it, and you've retracted it, you know, and said, yeah, okay, fair enough, I did make a mistake there, and yada, yada, yada. But you still believe after all that. So
Yeah, it's not my mistakes.
I want to pick on you the most because you're the person who digs your heels in. And my question to you is, right, if God is real, right, why has he left evidence for his non-existence?
Why has he left evidence for his non-existence? See, I would say the opposite. I'd say I look out the window and I look at nature, and I think there's plenty of evidence just in that. I look at DNA.
See, when I look out the window, I see the opposite. I see evolution.
So, well, I mean, you can believe that everything just sort of fell into place by chance, or you can think about it in a reasonable way. And
well, it wasn't by chance. Nature done it, you know, like nature works that way, you know, like, for instance, you know, things grow in my backyard, not by magic, you know, like nature's doing it, you know, like, for instance, like when weeds and things like grow in my backyard, they weren't created by anything. A bird flew over, shat in my backyard, and it had a seed in it and grew a weed.
right.
You know?
So let me ask you, let me get to, okay, do you guys think, the rest of you, let me see if I can, maybe we can turn the conversation
I don't think you'd agree to what he said there, would you, SJ? Because
Okay.
you would say that all of those processes are teleologically guided by God. So like
That's what
the
I would
bird
say.
doing
Mhm.
that, you know, like,
No,
so what,
nature done it. Nature does that. That's how
Right.
nature works.
well, I
Do you
agree,
ever feel that you replace, like, when I think Richard Dawkins does this? I read his book, The God Delusion, and I think a lot of times he replaces the words like nature and evolution with God. Or I'm sorry, he takes God out of the equation and replaces those with words like nature and evolution.
Yeah, that's right, because we see nature work like that today. I see it work as well like that.
so does
You know,
SJ, though, that's what I'm trying to say.
I'll give you an example, right? Let's just say a bird lays, say, 5 eggs, right? And all the birds grow up. And there's, out of those birds, they all look pretty healthy, but nature has produced 2 of those birds with defects. Now, the mother of that bird doesn't know those 2 defects, and it's feeding the little chicks. And, you know, after a while, they start growing up. And one of the birds has got a defect where its feathers ain't going to grow and it's never going to fly, right? And so that bird there is destined to die and fail and never get a chance to pass on the bad gene. So that's one bird out of the equation. And the next bird might grow up with, say, half a feather or a leg missing or something like that. So nature takes care of that by those birds not procreating and passing on the bad gene. So therefore, we see all birds flying. We don't see birds that don't fly because they died. And that's nature doing.
Okay, well, let me just do a comparison here. If I were looking at a house, and I would never make the claim that a house doesn't have a builder based on the fact that there's a defect in the walls or there's a defect in the flooring or something like that. I would, and you could say nature, we could say, well, the real estate market will take care of that because people won't buy the house. And so other people, when they build other houses, would improve on that particular wall issue or the particular flooring or something like that. And so all I'm trying to say is that I would never claim there's no builder behind the whole process itself, because it wouldn't make any sense. Now, another argument that a lot of people like you would probably take next is you say, well, wait a second, if he's a perfect God, why did he create imperfect humans? And
Yeah.
I think that's the whole process. Well, that's the whole process of wondering, what is our purpose? Why are we here? Why are we imperfect? Like, why didn't he create perfect humans? And so
because our parents had sex and created me. That's why we're here.
okay, well, let me just
I
say
don't think that SJ actually disagrees with any of the things that you've said. The difference is, I think you're not seeing where you've got like different worldviews and where they butt up against each other. So it isn't like SJ agrees that birds exist and that birds lay eggs and that some birds die and that people have sex to reproduce. All of like none of those things aren't a feature of SJ's worldview. SJ is just saying that like an explanation for why these natural processes are the way they are is, for example, that, you know, a God's created the universe and put these natural laws in place that are directed towards producing life. and so forth. Now you can put both of your worldviews side by side and say, well, my one's a better explanation of all these things than your one is. But just saying, like, you know, birds exist and some birds die and stuff. Like, SJ isn't denying that some birds die, or
that all humans are flawed. There's not a single human on this planet who doesn't have some sort of flaws, whether they're physical or mental or something like that.
Humans are their own worst enemies, because the person who, let's say, a human grew up and it had no legs and no arms, right? And I've actually talked to people on here in wheelchairs like that, right? Now,
right.
We look after those people because we're humans. We have brains. We can put them in hospitals. We can make wheelchairs and yada yada yada. But in nature, right, they don't get the chance to do that, right? So what I'm saying is, humans are the worst enemy for passing on bad genes. Now, I've heard the argument where 95% of mutations are bad, right?
Someone's got a clicking noise here. I just want to figure out who that is, because there's a definite clicking going on, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know who it is either. It's not me, but it's not. I don't know who it is, but it doesn't matter. But see, you know, when they say, oh, well, you know, and I've heard that argument before where 90% of mutations are bad. Well, it's not. It's actually good, because we're getting rid of all the bad. We're getting rid of all the bad mutations, and the 5% we do get through who are good. They are good. Because if it was in reverse, then it would be a bad thing.
Well, let me ask you this, and this could be to not just you, but to all of you guys here. Think about this. A lot of this idea of, oh, there are some bad genes out there, and we can take charge of our genes. Some of this speaks into eugenics, and this idea that should we have a master human race and just eliminate anyone who has deformities or has some sort of, personal issues, or is born maybe without limbs or something like that. Is that something that would be an option to you? Because I actually completely go against that. I'm against elective abortions merely because somebody has Down syndrome. I don't think that's a good move at all.
Well, if they can detect it early enough, and it's only a fetus, it's not a human, it's only a fetus.
How is a fetus not a human?
Well, because it doesn't have any arms and legs and a brain and all that. It's a fetus.
So if a human, so you have to have arms and legs to be a human?
No, you have to be born to be a human. Like, you have to actually get out into the world and start breathing. Then you are a human.
So you would say that abortion up to 9 months is okay because this is not a human?
No. That you know, when they say 6, 7, 8, 9 months, you know, like I go, nah, listen, it's too late. You know, like the time period. But if you can detect it, right, which we can apparently with because technology is pretty good these days, where you can detect it, you know, like at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, whatever it is. Yeah, abort it, right?
Really? So it's because it's not a human. So see what you're doing. No, what you're doing, Bulldog. What you're doing here is you're basically saying, okay, we are going to decide when a person is a human inside the womb, and you're just arbitrarily picking a day, saying, was it 5 weeks? Is it 5 days? When did this person become a human to you? And you say, well, they have to be born. So you're just going to again pick arbitrary dates, say it's a non-human all the way up till birth.
No. So you've twisted my words. I says there's going to be a cutoff date. You know, like when it's 5, 6, 7.
Well, when
8,
is it? When's the cutoff date?
Well, I would say in the first few months, and when I mean months, I'm not talking 7 or 8 months. I'm talking weeks, basically, right? Because they can detect certain things. As technology gets better and better, we can detect it early. So when it's a fetus, right? It is detectable at a certain. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know the particular time and all the rest of it. And it's not a human then. It's a fetus. It's actually a zygote or whatever they call it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go. Let me just go to the rest of the people who are in here. So do you guys all agree that we can arbitrarily pick a date for when this baby inside of us is going to be termed a human and be eligible for life?
It's not arbitrary. Based on when we think that the baby is to a point of consciousness and is going to experience pain.
Okay, so would you say that if somebody has gone into a coma, after birth, maybe a person who's 60 years old goes into a coma, can we just go ahead and kill that person? because they're not conscious?
Is there another human being that is unwillingly having to sacrifice their own body for that person to stay alive?
So when you say sacrifice their own body, do you mean if the person's going to die and if the
No.
baby remains in the room?
It means sacrifice like your personal health, because being pregnant is not good for the woman.
It actually is good for the woman. You got less possibility of getting cancer, for example, after you've been pregnant.
Cancer is not the only factor. It's sapping nutrients from you.
Sapping nutrients. As a woman who's had 2 kids and I was pregnant 3 times, unfortunately, one did result in a miscarriage. I can say that it was probably the most joyful time of my life. I loved being pregnant. And
Doesn't matter. That was your choice. I said unwillingly. When we have someone who's unwilling, see that like, would you be joyful if I said, we're going to force you to give up your kidney and we're going to stick it in this guy. He's going to die without it. So we're going to force you to give up your kidney in order for him to live. You would not be willing to do that. But you're okay with other women having to give up their use of their organs to the baby unwillingly. They're going to be forced to do so.
Well, I would just say, I would just advocate that these women really number one, go get the ultrasound and take a look at what's inside of them. Number 2, I would definitely say that you want to consider that there's an option.
Which you don't have to say, because by law they're required to do that before getting an abortion. So that you don't even.
Now, Ershman is making up a pretty good point. He says, "Was the person willfully having sex?" I think that's a pretty good point right there, because
willfully having sex is not the same as willfully I'm going to let you leech off of my body, because you can.
Sex is only ever willful. That's what the definition of sex is.
I didn't say that the sex is unwillful.
I'm not responding to you. I was responding to the question, not to you. I was just saying willful sex is redundant.
So we don't just use sex for procreation. We use it for pleasure. And I realize that it's an irresponsible move for a woman to get pregnant if she doesn't want a kid. But should we punish the child and bring them into a world to a mom that doesn't want them?
I think adoption is a fine option.
It's not always. How many kids end up, especially the unwanted ones, and many times these are like crack babies or minorities that end up not being adopted, and they end up in group homes and bouncing from foster home to adopted children. Their track record is not good. I don't know.
Steve Jobs would be a good exception to that.
Yeah, he's an exception. That's the point.
Well, I'm not saying that that's the rule either, that you've made a claim. I mean, you're making a claim. Do you have evidence that's in statistical facts that people who've been adopted?
This still is a sidestep and a distraction from the leeching of the body too. It doesn't, even if adoption is an option, it doesn't make it okay to leech off of the woman's body.
So let me ask, there's a few people here who haven't talked so much, like Irish with some son, I know is somewhat Catholic or somewhat Christian, Apocalypse John, and Craig Reed. You guys are the 3 other sort of Christians here. And I say sort of because I'm not
Christians.
Well, no, John is a definite, you're a Christian.
Yeah.
You're also a pastor.
I wanted to run by you.
You want to run it by John?
No, I actually had a thought about, so I'm kind of, as you said, because I've become kind of agnostic, I've been rethinking why I believe certain things. And one of the things that's up in the air is the abortion debate. Now, I have a thought about it. I haven't really seen other people talk about this, but in a way, sometimes people will say, so to be a person, we require, consciousness or something. And like you said, if someone slips into a coma, are we just going to say they're not a person anymore? So my thought was, what if we incorporate not just consciousness, but kind of agency? So it's kind of like this. A fetus that has not yet expressed agency and can't suffer, we can say that, okay, they're still human, but we wouldn't call them an agent. Now, someone who is born, they can suffer, and then they slip into a coma, we can still say, well, that person exercised agency. And it's not often that you'll find someone who willingly goes into a coma. So if they did go into a coma, it was probably against their will. So it's like, can we kill them then? Well, probably not, because they didn't want to slip into that coma in the first place. And if they could assent to it, they probably wouldn't assent to them being killed. So I would say that there's a difference between someone who has evolved the capacity to experience suffering and to, act upon their will, as opposed to something that hasn't even reached the point of consciousness yet, can't suffer and can't act on their will. So they would still be humans, but we wouldn't call them agents. So in that regards, could you kind of say that there is a distinction between someone who is born and someone who hasn't been born yet?
See, I see what I see is going on in this kind of conversation is the same kind of thing I saw going on during the Nazi war, where people try to, or even during the slave period in the United States, when people try to dehumanize other people and claim that they're lesser. And so when you don't,
SJ, isn't it?
Well, wait, let me just say, so if you go and you say that the fetus inside of you needs agency, or it needs to be conscious, or it needs to not feel pain or something like that, it's really just saying this person is not really a person, we're not going to justify that this person is given a right to live.
That is not a fair comparison, because when you're talking about what the Nazis did, you're talking about, I'm a person and I'm a conscious adult, and he's a conscious adult, but I'm going to say he's not a person. The distinction we're making with the fetus is the lack of consciousness. So you're ignoring the key difference that we're using to decide.
I think it gets really messy, doesn't it, though? Do you guys agree that this gets kind of messy when you say that? I mean, what I'm saying, my position is that at conception, this is a person. No, I'm just saying at conception, it's a person. Now, and I don't know, because Craig and Irish and
racial or religious or racial lines, I guess they were Jews, whatever. So we're saying, no, you don't. We're not going to abort someone because of their race. We're doing it because they're not conscious yet, and they're leeching off of someone. And I think you can't say the same about the Jews. The Jews were not requiring somebody else's body to live, and they did have consciousness. So you're totally.
I think it just gets a little bit messy when you start trying to say that they require certain things.
Having had I think that I'm not saying this is where you should divide the line, but I think
baby is non-viable.
Someone who has the capacity to experience suffering,
so it would require things.
Wait, don't talk. You guys try not to talk over each other. So let me just say, Irish, say that again.
So I'm asking if we can make the distinction between. We're admitting that they're part of the human species, but the question is about when do we assign personhood and agency? So we're not saying, oh, they're a person, we're going to abort them anyway. The question is, what if we decided to attribute personhood only to something that can experience suffering and can exercise their will? Because then you could apply that to say, if we met an alien race, and then we could say, well, can they experience suffering? Can they exercise their will? Okay, we'll treat them as persons. So in this case, if they even know they're part of the human species, if they haven't even become conscious, if they can't experience suffering, if they've never exercised their will, then we could surely make a distinction between them and someone who unwillingly went into a coma, but was a person with agency who didn't assent to become unconscious. So don't you think that that's not really arbitrary, but we could make a distinction between?
Yeah, I see. I wouldn't make that distinction. So I have a question here from Converse Contender, and I think I had a couple other questions. So it says, ask him why child support shouldn't be necessary for women, but is for men, even if they don't want the child. So why do men have to do child support and women wouldn't have to pay the child support? Yeah, I think he means, because actually what if the woman is the moneymaker and the man is not the moneymaker and the child is in the custody of the man? I would assume the woman has to pay child support in a case like that. I'm not sure, actually, though. I don't know those laws. Anyone have a thought on that?
I'm confused.
So what makes it?
Yeah, I think maybe we were. I think we were beginning to make some progress on that original point, and it might be more.
So is anyone in the room in agreement with me? Because I don't know. I'm curious to know where John and Craig stand, because you guys are two other Christians, and then also even what Ronan thinks, but in agreement with me that life begins at conception. Does anybody believe that that's true? Because I know you guys are a little bit more liberal, Craig and John, than I am. Or if you want to say just a little less conservative, you want to put it that way. I don't know.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I think talking about the conception point is just tricky, and I just don't know enough about the sort of science and also the accounts of consciousness that are being talked about here. And I tend not to, because I don't have the information necessary to make a claim that I think would be worth bringing to the table on this specific thing. What I tend to concentrate on instead while these debates are good and people are doing them, and that's great, is how do we, both Christians and non-Christians, pursue a world where abortions can become less and less? Because I don't think we want to say that abortions, even if we think that they're humans or not, I don't think we want to say that that's ultimately a good. Maybe we do, but I don't think. I think it would be better if this wasn't even a sort of topic of conversation. So how do we pursue a world, whether through healthcare or all sorts of different things outside of this particular discussion, this very specific discussion? I wonder if putting a more sort of effort into those conversations would actually be worthwhile.
See, I think that's a good.
It may sound like I'm avoiding the issue, but I'm.
No, you're not. You're saying
our concentration should be on that primarily, and then we can have these discussions about.
I agree, because you know what? I want to agree with you on something there that I think is really important. Number one, it's this idea of, are abortions a good thing? And I think when I saw people cheering in Ireland when they just passed the law that they're going to make people able to get legal abortions, and I saw all these people with pro-abortion signs and stuff like that, I thought, what in the world's going on? This is not. This should be rare.
I would be on your side with that, SJ. Even though I'm not convinced necessarily that life begins at conception, I would never just say that abortions are a good thing. I don't think I can, from my sort of theological perspective, especially to do with the Imago Dei. That's kind of where I would come from on this, is the image of God stuff. But yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Yeah.
But I think even with the cheering, I think it wasn't people, like, you have to understand the context of Ireland that goes back to the Catholic Church and
so what he's saying
religiosity
is,
and everything. So when
how can you
people
make them less
were
common?
cheering, it wasn't necessarily because they were cheering, oh, we can have an abortion. It was about what it represented. It represented Ireland moving forward in terms of, certain values. You might not value them, but certain progressive values. It represented the idea, because even if you don't believe abortions, even if you think they kill people, I mean, you're still having this idea of autonomy over the body. So it's more about what it represented to the people, as opposed to saying, yes, I want to have abortion. Because I think even most people who think abortions are fine aren't celebrating the act itself, but it's the choice.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah. And I think something that
we can all agree on that then, hopefully.
Something that Outbound was really getting at when he was talking was just how complicated it is when we're talking about women as an agent, and also potentially another agent involved. Like, this is always already going to be tricky because we have these two agencies. Even if we want to distinguish between agency, I think, which is what Irish with this Samson was saying, and human being, was that right? Agency and humanity, humans different. Were you suggesting that?
I'm not sure.
No.
Well, I think he might not. I want to say, just really quick, to say hi to Jim. Jim's entered here, and I don't think Jim's ever been on my station either. So you're on mute though, Jim.
Yeah, I heard about you recently, and so I subscribed to your channel, and so I'm kind of starting my own stuff, and I think you have some good content. So thanks for having me.
Oh, good. Thanks. Now, are you a Christian or a non-believer, or where do you stand?
I'm a Christian.
Okay.
Pretty confident in that. It's just a weird. It's a weird thing because I think I take the faith version, like kind of like I kind of act it out in a lot of ways. Like, I don't think you can truly know a lot of things, and that's where faith comes in. And it's not always easy to explain.
Do you mean faith as in trust, or faith as in I'm just going to believe something because an authority told me to?
Faith is in confidence.
I mean,
I think faith is another form of confidence. Not and here's the thing.
Yeah,
even Lewis, hang on. Even Lewis will sit there and say that you can learn everything there is in the world, but you still have to make a leap.
Okay, but is that confidence based on some kind of reason or evidence, or is it just because some authority told you?
No, it's based off of my own reasoning and evidence.
Well, then it's kind of a waste of time to use the word faith. It would be much more constructive in a discussion like this to just get to what the actual argument is.
No, it's actually not, because that's what we're dealing with when we talk about
all of the arguments I've presented today. I could have ignored them and said nothing and just go, well, I just have faith that my arguments are right. I trust in my own argument, which is what you're saying. You just have to have faith in your own argument.
I don't think that's necessarily a fair characterization because I think
I mean, it is
he
what it is.
characterized it that way. He said confidence.
No, because I think what he said was that he had reasons to believe it, but at the end of the day, sometimes your reasoning on many subjects is not going to get you all the way. Sometimes you have to decide, okay, based on the evidence,
so that
what
means
do I think?
now wait a minute. That's not what he said. He said
That is actually what I said. Irish, you summed it up very well. Thank you.
Hold on.
You can
Okay,
call me
now
Tom,
you're gonna
it's a lot easier.
hold on. If you're gonna switch back then and say it's not based on the reason, if the reasons don't get you there, then it's not. They're not enough. So
Well,
what
let me
Reasons can get you some of the
what's
way.
the
but-
other thing that your confidence is built on besides just authority telling you so?
Well, let me ask Jim this. Let me ask him, did you come to believe in Christianity because of an experience, a spiritual experience or a personal experience you had, or did you come because you started studying maybe the Bible or something like that?
Both. And for
Okay.
me, I also take I would take the atheistic evolutionary perspective over the faith perspective in order to understand it. And what I see is mirror images versus other things. But generally speaking, yes, I believe in God through my own hard work and dedication, through my own reasoning and logic.
Seems reasonable. Oh, I've got.
I mean, see, again, we're going in circles with this. Like, if you have the reasons and logic, you just present those. If they don't get you there and you need something else.
No, it's not. It doesn't it gets me there. The question is, does it get you there? And that's where we're having this projection coming back and forth.
Okay,
there.
we'd be able to get into that discussion easier if we could drop this whole faith thing and just discuss the reasons.
Well, faith is part of it.
You just said it was.
No, faith is part of it.
I don't think you're grasping the line that.
Can I jump in here real quick? Maybe.
Bulldog is rolling a joint on stream. Bulldog,
Yeah,
you
nice.
just put your camera out, man.
No, it's not a
Oh,
joint.
come on.
It's
That's not a joint?
No. It's tobacco.
Oh,
You can
Oh,
tobacco.
okay.
Ouch.
Okay. That's better. So we have Jacob here. He's been on the stream before. So hi, Jacob. I just want to say hi to you real quick.
Hi, everybody. Hi, SJ.
So you said in the chat that you had an experience with abortion that you wanted to share.
Yeah, and
So we're just going to leave that dispute and totally ignore it and go to something else.
Well, we were on abortion before, so I mean, I don't think I don't see the idea. I don't see a dichotomy between faith and evidence. I actually see
I'm not saying there's a dichotomy. I'm saying it depends how you use the word. If you mean, and see, this is the thing that is real common too. When somebody has a good reason or logic that gets you there, they don't say, "I have faith." You don't need anything else. If you have a solid, logical, reason-based, evidence-based grounding for something, you will never use the word faith ever.
I don't agree with that. I feel like I think it's a big combination. I feel like part of my belief definitely includes some faith, and it also includes evidence and experiences.
So
But if it doesn't get you there by itself, then it's not even evidence. Like evidence is something that is going to positively be indicative of one hypothesis, and it's going to exclude all the others. If you have something that is positive, that could be positively indicative of two different hypotheses, it's evidence of neither. You basically still left with something that doesn't.
Do you think that evidence in court cases always leads to certain conclusions?
Huh?
Do you think that evidence that's brought to court for certain court cases always leads to certain conclusions, or do you think that evidence might point in the direction, but then you decide, okay, this is what makes the most sense? We don't know for sure, but it's what makes the most sense.
You're supposed to rule on reasonable doubt, right? Like nothing is. We could be in a matrix. Nothing's 100%.
No, you can also look at the preponderance of evidence, which is most likely then.
Actually, that's a good comparison, looking at the courts and like if you're trying to make a conviction, you take all of the evidence together and you put it together. You don't just pick one piece of evidence and start ruling out the other one.
I never said anything about one piece. He didn't even list one. He just said, "I have faith," which is an empty assertion. It's not. There's nothing there to work with.
Okay.
You could just say the thing. If you have a set of them, let's go to the
My
strong.
thing is the narrative.
The
The
strongest
narrative
one.
makes the most sense of all the other religions out there, and I've studied many of them.
You know,
And
before I
came to the
forget,
conclusion
It
that
makes the
this
most
one
sense. I
makes
mean,
the most
but what
sense.
makes you think any religion, like what makes you think any religion might be? How do you know they're not all wrong? How did you?
How do you
like,
know?
why
Right?
Why do we start with the assumption that automatically one of them is right?
Because I made a decision that I believe that this one's the most right, based off of the preponderance of evidence, most likely than, which is 51%.
Which evidence?
One, the narrative of human history.
How does history? How is that evidence? How is
that
Well,
is
wait,
that is
let
evidence.
him explain. Let Jim first say. Can you name a few things that you think would be a good?
The Bible does have some corroborating evidence, both in time and space across the entire narrative. So
Name
I mean,
one.
like you
name one.
You can debate on Exodus, the Hebrews,
which never happened. It's been proven that it did not happen.
No, it's been proven that people had the wrong pharaoh.
Well, I mean, it can have the wrong pharaoh. But here's the problem when you talk history. All right, whenever history happens, right, and you move further away from that point of origin, facts become myths automatically. I mean, if that's the case, we wouldn't have Abraham didn't tell a lie, or or Washington chopped down the cherry tree. We wouldn't have these things that we believe are true. Okay, fundamentally speaking, the Bible is corroborated in some loose term with history.
Okay, but I mean, there are things like, I mean, you're like, if there's a king or a city in the Bible that's real, which I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Actually, there are, and
okay,
there's corroborating
there's a
evidence
city
of the
in
fall
Spider-Man that's real.
of the Akkadian Empire.
Spider-Man's in New York. That doesn't make Spider-Man real.
Okay.
Like, anybody can write a fiction and put real places in it. We're talking about proving that there's a God, or that Jesus is divine, or that he was resurrected.
Okay. If that's the case, you can't prove that you're existing right now, can you? Because you have to rely on history. You have to rely on corroborating evidence to prove in some historical facts that things have happened prior to, other than you being there, because you could just be hallucinating that you've been there.
I've already acknowledged that nothing. We could be in a matrix. I could be a figment of your imagination. Okay. Nothing's 100% sure, right? But all we have is the evidence to look at, and you've got more evidence. You're looking at me on camera. Jesus isn't here, so you get on camera with Jesus, and you'll have equal evidence that he exists.
Okay. So that is what you think is the epistemological standard for you. That is your standard of evidence. Unless Jesus appears to you and in the flesh, that is your standard of evidence. Because if we look at the Bible,
so your standard of evidence says that I'm going to believe something I see isn't there, but
you
something
just said
I don't see is there.
You said that you would believe something that if it appears itself to you.
No, I didn't say I would believe it. I'm talking about.
Then how do we get there?
Oh, wait, you guys, let's
say I believe anything. I said that I'm here and you see me on video, so this is stronger evidence that I exist than what you have for Jesus.
So let me ask you this. We don't have evidence that quite a few people existed in human history. I mean, we have estimates from the Population Reference Bureau that 108 billion people have walked on this planet or are currently walking on this planet. And so we also know from the Population Reference Bureau that 57% of those have happened after the year 1 AD. And so that's pretty interesting, considering that's a majority of people have walked on the earth after Jesus was born. And so, after Jesus was born. And so that's pretty neat. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because we have all of these people, these billions of people, and there's many. Well, just wait, Outbound. Let me continue. Just don't interrupt.
The population grows over time, so of course the later time is going to have a bigger number. What that doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
If we could start today and wait long enough, and after today, 50% of the population would be would be on the earth after today.
Right. My point. Wait, hold on. I'm going to mute you for just a second because I'm just trying to finish the point before I forget what I want to say. And I'll bring you right back in just 1 second. What I'm saying is that we don't have evidence that all of these billions of people, many of them existed. We don't have the bones for a lot of people. I mean, we don't have a lot of evidence we have evidence for some people in history, famous people in that. We don't have evidence for quite a few others. Does it mean they did not exist? No, it doesn't mean they did not exist. But what my point is, the one person that we have the most evidence for in all of history, that we have the most people in the world know about, is Jesus Christ. And so and here he came from the ancient Near East in this obscure little town. And suddenly we've got a ton of evidence supporting that there was a humble Jewish carpenter who suddenly became the most worshipped person on the planet. And so I'll unmute you now. I just wanted to be able to make my point.
We have zero evidence. We have zero evidence. And you're saying that these numbers that they say about the populations, they based it on nothing. You said there's no bones, there's no evidence at all. They just pulled the number out of the air.
No, it's the Population Reference Bureau. You can go check it. This is not a Christian group. It's a secular organization.
You said though. You said that we have no evidence of it, but yet that's their number. And then at the same time, you're also saying that that's somehow proof of Jesus because there's more people after
population. People who study populations have other ways to figure out how many people walked the earth.
Exactly.
Okay?
So it is based on evidence. So what you said earlier was false. It is.
What I'm trying to say is that we don't have specific evidence for every one of the persons who's walked this earth.
We use inference. It's what we do with like crime inspection. It's what do you call it? It's
right. So you could use inference also to go back to figure out when Jesus.
Right. And the forensics say Jesus never existed. It looks like a big plagiarism. The only evidence I've heard for Jesus is the population grows over time, which isn't evidence for Jesus. And there's cities in the Bible that were real, which if that's evidence for Jesus, then that means Spider-Man exists because New York is a real place too. So neither one of those qualifies. We're still waiting for the first piece of evidence. We still have zero evidence.
But there's a distinction between Jesus existing and Christianity being true, right? We know this, right?
How can you
know?
You're talking about the historical Jesus, right?
Yeah, of course. What else were we talking about?
I mean, it's still the evidence appears that he never existed. I mean, everything Jesus did.
No critical scholar historian agrees with you, except for Richard Carey and maybe a couple of other guys. But even atheist and agnostic scholars disagree with you on that. Sorry to say.
You're muted and you're still talking about
I had to put him on mute because he keeps interrupting, so I want to be able to make a point.
I want to say, as someone who isn't a Christian, that I can see how like someone like Carrier makes the case that he doesn't think Jesus existed. It's, he seems to think it's more probable that this is based off of like all these other myths being drawn together and so forth. But the consensus in scholarship amongst atheist and agnostic scholars is that Jesus existed. And as someone who isn't a Christian, I think that there was an apocalyptic preacher called Jesus who historically existed.
What makes you think that?
Pardon, sorry?
What makes you think that he existed?
Well, I'm not a historian, but all the research, so like David Friedrich Strauss, for example, in fact, like he's about the extent of the historians that I've read on it. But famously, he did a work. I think he kind of started modern historical criticism at a university called Gothenburg in Germany, and he wrote a book called The Life of Jesus, Historically Examined, where basically he compares all the sources and tries to pull out the historical figure of Jesus from like the mythology that had emerged over thousands of years of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, but there's no contemporary records of him. So you're saying there's nothing to compare though. You have the Bible, and then what else? What else?
I can speak to that. So we have within 150 years we have 42 sources that have.
No, wait a minute.
Within 152,
within 150 years later, then it's just a story. We're talking
within 150 years of Jesus, we have 42 sources, including 33 Christian sources and 9 secular hostile sources that have confirmed that there was a man, Jesus, in existence. The hostile sources haven't obviously said that. The hostile sources haven't. I have somebody in the chat who's trying to get in here. The hostile sources have also given us a lot of evidence that the apostles did believe that there was a man who had that they worshipped for decades.
I don't think we need to go there, actually, though. I think even just go so let's just compare explanations, right? So we've got. Would you agree, Outbound, that the 4 Gospels are different. They're not the same document, right? Even if they're dependent on each other.
So I put.
Oh yeah, sorry, you're muted. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I hit him on mute.
You would agree
Yeah,
that they're
it's too bad. It's like there's all this. Like I'm muted, so you can gish gallop and throw a whole bunch of stuff out there that's false, and I can't even reply to all of them.
Okay, well, I also want to say hi to Michael. I think this is Canadian Atheist who's here, so let me just make sure I introduce him too.
This is why I try to
Hey,
interject.
how are you? So yeah, there's been a whole lot of I've been listening for about 5 minutes. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, hi, Michael.
Yeah, I've been listening for about 5-ish, maybe 10 minutes or so, and I've heard a whole lot of interesting things. So here's my 2 cents. And yeah, I do a little bitty podcast that SJ's been on called The Canadian Atheist, and I'd welcome any Christian here onto that. We can I can give you contact info later. Okay, so the most famous person in history. We have no idea when he was born. We have no idea when he died. You have 4 gospels, the earliest written probably 4 decades after. You can have all the sources 150 years later. Super cool. 150 years later. But it's interesting. And I don't dispute anymore, really, that Jesus existed. If I read Robert Price or Richard Carrier, I'm pretty sure he didn't exist. If I read Bart Ehrman, I'm pretty, and others, pretty sure he existed. Who cares? The divinity aspect, that's what's important, and we know that's garbage. So it doesn't even matter. We know when people like Marcus Aurelius lived, like was born and died, but the most famous person in human history, you've got between 6 and 4 BCE to between 30 and 33. That's really impressive for the most important person that ever lived.
I can speak to that. Let me just add to a few. You made a bunch of points there, so I just wanted to add to a couple.
And not one outside source, by the way, even though you said there were. We do have evidence of men named Jesus, but none of them, if brought to and shown the story of Jesus, would recognize that story as themselves. Not one of them.
Okay, listen. So we have what he said. We're not estimating that Jesus was born between 6 and 4 BC. Actually, a lot of the estimations I've seen lately have been September 11th of 3 BC. And they came to those estimations because they realized that Schur's hypothesis with respect to the dating of when Herod died could either have been, Schur said it was 4 BC, so they estimated that Jesus had to be born prior to that. However, other estimations that have looked at Josephus and have looked at the calendar and have looked at when the Passover occurred, realized that actually 1 BC, when another eclipse occurred, would have been a better date. And so they've basically done that. We've also got a number of different evidences to suggest that Jesus died on April 3rd of 33 AD. And so we've got evidence in all sorts of different ways. And so the claim that everything came about 150 years later in writing really isn't true. The Gospels were all early. We have evidence of that in the fact that a lot of minor characters are named in the Gospels. And so when later events occur,
they say themselves that they were word of mouth before they were written down. It says right in the Gospels.
It says in the Gospels that Luke was compiling an orderly account. It also says in the book of Acts that Luke traveled with
the word of mouth. It's not Luke.
Let me just finish.
You attribute that, but Luke did not write the book of Luke.
Luke wrote the book of who's saying that? I can't tell who's talking.
I am.
I agree. I agree with him. I don't think Luke wrote.
None of the Gospels were written by
none of the Gospels are written by the people who they're attributed to.
So, do we have any ancient evidence that they're attributed to anyone else?
No, we don't have any evidence of who wrote.
They don't need to be attributed to someone specifically.
They make statements.
Really that much.
There are statements in the Gospels that heavily imply that they heard this word of mouth, and they're writing down what they heard was Luke's testimony.
None of them even claim to be eyewitness accounts.
They say in the Gospels that it's hearsay.
Okay, well, I would actually disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but I just also want to say Converse Contender is back.
You disagree with the Bible. You disagree with the Bible, then?
No, I don't see that in the Bible. What you're saying, I don't see is in the Bible.
Well, you need to take more time to read your Bible, especially if you're going to.
No, I've read the Bible numerous times. I don't see your.
Can I just make a comment on the?
Because I think you might have some good points for you.
Can I just make a point on the Jesus' birth date sort of?
Yeah.
Thing? Yeah, I don't think the September 11th date or anything like that really works historically. If you want to watch a great video of some scholars walking through how we can give kind of a range of dates. We cannot narrow it down to a specific date like September 11th.
Well, do you know why that? Do you know what the date is? How they got the date for that apocalypse? No.
The September 11th date.
Yeah, are you familiar with the
Is
methodology?
it something to make his point because he's been waiting quite a while, I think.
Yeah, I know that some people make it, but there are. So I don't know if any of you listen to the New Testament Review, which is a great podcast and YouTube channel. They just recently did a video. My wife is one of the scholars on that video, walking through how to make a historical case for a range of dates for Jesus's birth date from the Gospels that we actually have. Okay, so if you want to actually learn about that specific issue, I think that would be a good place to go. I don't really have time to kind of unpack that for you, unfortunately, but I would say that just simply saying that we think we know that Jesus was born on September 11th just isn't true.
I just said I think there's some evidence. There's some people who have been making positions on that, who have taken positions, like Michael Heiser has taken that position. And so
how can we have this repeated pattern of asserting that there's evidence and not presenting it?
Well, before I forget, I meant to do this before. Can we each go around? Because some people keep coming in and leaving. And I wanted to see if you guys can just let everybody know where people can find you on the internet. So if I could start with Nathan, because he was the first here, and kind of just go around and just.
Digital Gnosis is my YouTube channel name. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you can find him at Digital Gnosis. So who else we have? Outbound or John?
Sure. Apocalypse Here channel on YouTube. Find me on Twitter, John the Pew, and also Apocalypse Here. Yeah, it would be great if I could lay out all the evidence outbound, but you've been talking pretty much over everybody this entire time, so it's hard to actually fit in anything to say in response to what you're saying, especially because I don't have all day to be on here. So it would be great if you could
use that time right there, though.
Yeah, well, I was asked a specific question. Also, no, I couldn't because it doesn't take 10 seconds to lay out the evidence.
Question about your contact information, instead of going into me interrupting, because I was muted and silent at the time, instead of complaining about the interruptions, which I do because there's gish galloping going on.
I'm just surprised people aren't dousing you with a bucket of water, man.
I'll sit here and wait patiently for evidence, but as soon as something,
we don't have all day, man.
I know. Outbound. Wait, I want to say.
I'm sorry if you
Outbound,
do, but not everyone does.
Want the strongest one. Like, we're still waiting for the first piece of evidence, just one.
Okay, Outbound. I want you to say. Can you let us know where we can find you online too?
You've already discounted that the Bible can present anything historically. You did that a priori.
What?
You already discounted that the Bible can present any kind of historical evidence. You said that already. You said you just have the Bible. So do you want to get into specific ways in which historical critical scholars
if you have something that is some evidence that there's anything worthwhile in the Bible at all, you could just get right into it. Like, instead of saying I've discounted it, give me a reason why I shouldn't discount it.
Well, let me first, Outbound. I really want to go around and let everybody say where we can find you.
This hidden thing. MentalTaco.com. Taco like the food. TACO. MentalTaco.com.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Irish with some sun. Where can we find you?
Well, you can just type up Irish with some sun on Twitter and you'll find me. It is also linked to my blog and my podcast. I've only done one episode, but I basically talk about my faith and my deconstruction to where I am now, and I talk about different issues as well. And I occasionally blog about different faith issues. So just Irish with some sun on Twitter, and you'll find everything else.
Cool, thank you. And Jim, where can we find you?
You can't find me yet, but keep an eye out for something called The Forge in the future. The Forge will be what the title of it will be.
Okay, good. Michael? Wait, you're on mute, Michael.
You can just Google the Canadian Atheist, and you'll find it there. We've had some pretty cool guests on it. Again, I open up the invitation to any of you here, and hint that includes you, SJ, on some of the things that we've chatted about on Twitter. Yeah.
Okay. Converse, where can we find you? Somebody's clicking noises. I don't know who's got that. We can find you at Converse Contender, right?
Yeah. Go ahead and let everybody else go. I wanted to challenge some of the claims made by Outbound. Go ahead.
Okay. Did I miss any? I missed Bulldog. Bulldog, where can we find you?
Just
Bulldog
contact.
might have- Okay, so let's go. Converse, we're going to open it up to you and Outbound challenging each other, I guess.
I was going to say, you can contact me. I'll get you in touch with Bulldog.
Okay.
And Nathan Orman is at Digital Gnosis. So, yeah, Outbound, you said that, let me ask you first, just kind of in order here. You said that, don't let me straw man you. You said that the case on abortion, you said that the mother is having to provide nourishment to the child. And you think it's a good argument that the mother should not have to provide nourishment for the child.
Yes.
Okay. So if you look at the courts over child support, the father's payments are going toward the food for nourishment of the child and shelter for the child. The mother's womb is acting as shelter and her body is acting as nourishment. You think it's okay that father should have to held accountable for child support, but the mother shouldn't have to support the child because it's located in her body. Is that a good argument?
I mean, there's a difference. First of all, there's a huge difference between money and your, sacrificing your organs. But I would say that our current child support system is immoral. I think that forcing somebody who doesn't have the means to pay and then throwing them in jail because they can't is a waste of resources. It doesn't help anything. I think if somebody has a sufficient amount of money, if they're very well off and they're not paying, it's really if it's not going to be a detriment to their health, in order to pay the support because they have so much in the bank that it's not going to be it's not going to really affect their life.
Then they should be forced to pay.
Then I could say, yeah, throw them in. That's a little unfair. But really, if we really think about it honestly, and instead of worrying about who we should punish because they did the wrong thing, I think we should have a more forward-looking perspective, and not just think about the well-being of the child, but also any potential person who may become a victim of that child if they end up growing up to be of a criminal nature due to their poor upbringing. So as a society, we should just collectively make sure all children are fed and housed and clothed. And another thing that would be really good for children is if both parents were home instead of having some stranger.
Well, I agree with that, but that's beside the point. That's irrelevant.
Instead of having some stranger caretaker care for the child, while you're at work 40 hours a week, every week, all year away from your child, we could just give you the money. And I mean, we have like programs that pay for childcare so you can go to work, which is so backwards. Like we could just give you the money. You're going to take care of your kid better than they will.
So back to the argument is, you were saying that, we should force some people if they're capable. So you just say that you have a doctor and a woman wants to have an abortion, but the doctor says she's perfectly capable.
Let me finish.
It's not going to harm her.
One more thing, just to be clear, why I make that distinction. Because if you're poor and we force you to start paying for this kid, you're going to now have to put in extra hours. It's more stress. It's detrimental to your health. And so now we're putting the health of one person over another. And I get that it's because they're a child. I understand that argument. But if there was no other way, I could see that justified. I just feel like in the modern technological world where we're freed from a lot of labor that we used to be, and there's so much abundance today, and meanwhile we're printing trillions of dollars and giving like 80% of it to the wealthy. I think we have plenty that we could take care of the children. So in that context, I think it's immoral to sacrifice the health of a parent, and it could be the mother or the father, and sometimes fathers have custody and mothers pay child support, I think it's immoral to make them to damage their health when we don't have to. Somebody who's well off, they're not going to have added stress or have to put more hours in because of it. They've already got the money. So they're damaging the child's well-being for no reason whatsoever.
Okay, let me stop you there because you're going for a while.
So
you made an argument that the child is that the mother is a victim to the child. I don't see how can you be a victim of something that you caused.
So
consenting to have sex doesn't mean you're consenting to be a parent.
If you get into a car, you know there's a risk of a car accident. If you're a passenger in the car, and the driver gets into a wreck and
you didn't cause that.
It's your fault. Yeah, you did. You
that.
got into the car. You caused your own damage.
You didn't cause the accident.
You didn't cause the accident, but
That's
you caused
the point.
You were the reason the accident harmed you because you took the risk and got into the car. So you should never get in a car because if you
I don't
do,
think the analogy is parallel.
if you get into a car and you get into your choices.
And I reject the point that the baby, that the mother's a victim.
You could have made a different choice, and you wouldn't have gotten into that accident.
Well, but that's like I say, this is just not analogous. Like it's not a parallel analogy. So I don't see how you can make it out that the mother getting pregnant as a result of her own actions
she's going to get pregnant. It's not guaranteed.
Yeah, but you called her a victim of what?
Yeah,
happened.
just like you would be the victim of a car accident.
Right, but she didn't cause the car accident. That's the whole point. She caused the baby. That's why they're not parallel. And then the other point that you made that fathers, and then the other point
she didn't cause it. She didn't decide what her biology was before she was born. She didn't. She didn't decide that the thing that would be pleasurable would also put her at risk of becoming pregnant. She didn't cause.
So why do we make men pay child support? It's because that
we have an immoral
because of their part in causing it.
Think about how absurd this is. So if you're a parent and you cannot take care of your child, but you're the custodial parent, we will give you welfare. If you're a parent and you're not the custodial parent and you can't take care of the child, we will throw you in jail. Does that make sense?
Are you guys there? Am I buffering?
If we care about the child, we would forget about who's to blame and to punish, and we would just make sure the kid has what it needs: food, shelter, clothing, and a lot of time with its parents, and education, and health care. If you really have a concern for these kids, you wouldn't even give a fuck who's to blame or to punish.
Okay, so that's completely beside the point. The argument isn't who should we punish for this. It's let's hold people to a consistent standard. We've always made men pay child support for their role in creating a child, and we've never held women accountable for child support. Hold on. I'll let you go. So I remember listening to a debate with Matt Dillahunty and a female atheist, and she was making this exact argument that women should have to do their child support through supporting the child with the nourishment and the shelter of their womb. It was completely besides the point whether I believe that the child is whatever my beliefs are. I've heard this argued from an atheist perspective, so that's completely beside the point. And then the other point is, like you said, well, if men, I did want to get onto your other historical claims, but you said if men are of a certain, they're capable of paying, that they should be forced to pay. But it's like, and then you kind of sidestep like, well, if women are perfectly fine, it's not going to harm them, and their doctor says it won't, but they want to have an abortion, should they still be forced to have the abortion? You're like, no, because it might have some effect on them.
What?
Well, which part did you miss?
I didn't say that.
No.
I never said anything about forcing someone to have an abortion.
No, you said that men should have to pay child support if they are financially capable. And I said, what about the parallel argument that women should have to have the abortion, or shouldn't be able to, if the doctor says that it's not going to harm them in any way?
If we're assuming that we're going to have a child support system, I would say it would be better to just have the wealthy do it. But honestly, I really don't think we should have one whatsoever. Society should just take care of the kids. Like, why don't we just take care of them? We can. Why
Let me
don't
just stop. Let me just stop for a second. I want to go to Jacob because he's been trying to say something about this abortion argument for
Yeah,
a
go on.
while, and I only want to go till 3:30 my time,
Oh,
which is just 6 more minutes. I just want to point that out. So, Jacob.
Yeah,
you wanna-
thanks, SJ. Yeah, are you able to hear me? I'm for some reason I'm having trouble with
hear
my
you fine.
technology today.
Yeah, mine too. Mine's buffering.
Okay,
a lot,
great.
So, but yeah.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, I was. So this is kind of jumping back to a point in the stream earlier when the abortion was being discussed, and I think the challenge is, as we discuss this, is that the reasoning that is presented often is switching back and forth between sort of a yes and no, evidence or non-evidence way into, well, now we'll go into sort of a concept that that there's a spectrum of. And so, that's really the way you have to look at it from my point of view, because there's very rarely things in this issue that you can say yes, no, and presenting one scenario that you feel gives that gives the definitive evidence to where your position is absolutely right is challenging. And the thing I wanted to bring up was related to something that you said, SJ. Oh, and let me state where my position is so you kind of have some context. I believe, legally speaking, that access to abortion should be legal. That doesn't mean that I'm pro-abortion. I'm pro a woman's choice to do that. And I do have opinions on where I think a lot of choices for abortion just seem to me to be, I just don't understand them. I think there's nothing wrong with using the word faith or belief or sensibilities. And in my case, so now I'll share my experience. In my case, I had a number of children with the same woman. She's my ex-wife now. We did have a pregnancy before we were married when we were teenagers, and scared the life out of us. It was stupid because we weren't using contraception, but it was because we were kind of dumb about it. We were uneducated. And we ended up, she chose to get an abortion. When I say she chose, we discussed it and I told her I would support it either way. We didn't see how we could have a baby. The information we got at the time is it was very early. I can't tell you the number of weeks, but they called the procedure a DNC. They didn't even call it an abortion because apparently, we found out she was had probably only been pregnant for 2 to 3 weeks. And so we were, it was explained to us that it really wasn't a baby and et cetera. And it actually wasn't a baby. Whether it was a life or not, that's not the same thing. And the point was, at the time, it was not an easy decision. And we did have some regrets, but there was an insane amount of pressure. Now, that's not the same as a woman who, say, is raped. Okay. But we still wanted to be together, but we were teenagers, didn't know, weren't on our own, etc. Years later, we kind of, as we started having children in our family, which by the way, somebody talks about contraception. We had a lot of children, and we always used contraception. So apparently, I'm so potent that I can destroy contraception, but that's another matter. But we had several children, and as we had children, there grew lingering regret that this first child wasn't with us. And now that my children are all grown, I look back and I reconciled what's happened, but I do regret. Now, I don't know how we would have taken care of it, but the point is that's just my story, and it's only related to me. And so, in the conversation just saying, well, you can get an abortion, you can't get an abortion, you should do this and you should do that, it's kind of taking out the human factor, in that I no longer call myself a Christian, but I was a devout Christian for decades as we had our family and raised the children. So I no longer consider myself a Christian, but I still have regrets about having that abortion. And so I don't feel that it's solely that the idea of looking at a life and when does a life happen and is an abortion right? Is it moral? I don't see it solely as if you're a Christian, you think it's a sin, and you're an atheist, so you think it's okay because it's just biology. And I'll finish with saying that there's something I learned about the biology, because I've been trying to learn about it, studying a lot about the last 6 months, because it's just one of those things that you reflect on and think, I need to know about this. I only learned within the last week from information at the Stanford University website that the moment of conception, where many people say this is where life begins, the moment of fertilization, that's not when the cell cluster's DNA is formed. It's about at the end of the second week. So until the genetic material from the mother and the father have actually gone through the process, and that has nothing to do with, is it a fetus, or is it viable inside the mom? This has to do
I gotta
with
kind
whether
of
or not,
go a little quicker because I really gotta go.
Yeah, real quick. So for me, I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking, I'm not sure that life begins at conception, because I've always thought that, even as an atheist. It seems to me that if the genetic whole is where life begins biologically, that's about the end of the second week. So,
yeah,
so
I partially agree
related
with you.
to me, I think that's probably about where we were. So maybe I'm rationalizing, but I feel a little bit better about what we went through, because, maybe it wasn't a life yet. But anyway, so I know that was a lot of things, but I was hoping to kind of have that a little bit in the conversation, but it kind of didn't work, and then I got my technology killed. So.
No, I'm glad you brought a human picture into it, because a lot of times we talk about this as if we're not talking about a human or, people's lives affected, and you're talking about your life, your family's life, and all that kind of stuff. So you certainly have everything affected. So
I have a question for you before